The current war which is unfolding in Ukraine has two sides to it, as most wars. There's the military one and the political one. The more prolonged the war is going, etc., it's going to get more costly for Russia. So the question is whether the US has deliberately pushed Putin into a war as a trap, where the political outcome is always uncertain, to precipitate his downfall. Once he is out of the picture, once Putin is out of the picture, the polarity of geopolitical power may shift in back into the camp of the US. So he's saying that. So Vashish is saying, if Putin may win, although he may win militarily, if he cannot rally the Russian and the Ukrainian people to his cause, he is doomed. I disagree with that. It is, of course, see the we have to understand the character, the nature of the Russian people. The Russian people are accustomed to hardships. Unfortunately, it's a tragic land. Look at the history of the past 1,000 years. Look at the great Russian writers, Tolstoy, Turgenev, and many of these writers. Look at the stories they write. It's all tragedy. It's all tragic. The whole Russian history, the ethos, is tragic. They have always had these powerful rulers, tsars, Nicholas the Great, Ivan the Terrible, Catherine the Great, and so on and so forth. She was a tsarina, of course. So the thing about Russia is this. And then we had people like Stalin and so on. The thing about Russia is this: the people of Russia will tolerate hardship, but they will not tolerate failure. They will not tolerate a weak ruler. And Mr. Putin is not a weak ruler. The people of Russia know what they are in for. They understand that the West does not consider them as equals. The West wants to see Russia destroyed and fragmented. The people of Russia understand this. Russia is not a Western nation. Okay, so what the people of Russia will not tolerate is failure, military failure or political failure. Hardships they will tolerate. They have been accustomed to hardships for the past 1,000 years. So that is not an issue. So I would not agree that he cannot, if he cannot rally the people to his cause, he's doomed. All he has to do is he has to succeed. He has to succeed in his political and military objectives, the short-term objectives of capturing Ukraine and whatever he intends to do with the country. And long-term, he has to, whatever else he's doing, he needs to pursue that, and he has to succeed at that. And if you look at his track record over the past 20 years, he has been a successful ruler, and that is what the Russian people want. They don't mind hardships. They even tolerated Stalin, but Stalin was brutal. He did untold, terrifying, terrible things on the Russian people. Lots of people, unfortunately, died as a result of his policies, but at least he was successful and he was able. See, the thing that the USSR was able to achieve, they took a broken country, a broken nation, and they built it into a superpower within just a few decades without destroying the world, without committing genocide all over the world, and without plundering and looting the rest of the world. The English speaking people who rule the world today, they were able to achieve the superpower status by committing atrocities, genocide, and plunder on a global scale. The Russians did it without committing genocide and plunder and destruction on a global scale. Right? They were able to industrialize the country, and yes, there was a terrible Holodomor, the terrible famine, and all the repression that Stalin did, and in later rulers also did. And of course, we know that millions of people died as a consequence of these policies. Some of the policies were misguided, some of them were just terrible. But overall, from the big picture perspective, the nation became a superpower. They had to pay a terrible price, but they did not make the rest of the world pay the price for their rise. So that is something even the English speaking world has not been able to achieve, to rise on its own without destroying the world. So that is something they were able to do it. And the Russians are rightfully, justifiably proud of what they were able to achieve at that great cost. So they will not tolerate failure. They want success. They will endure hardships. They are a hardy people. Now, has the US deliberately pushed Putin into this war as a trap? Of course they have. Of course they have. They cornered the US, sorry, not the USSR. It's kind of interchangeable, right, these days. So they cornered Russia. They put Russia into a corner. They slowly encircled Russia. See, the Americans they always need a big enemy. The Americans need bad guys. If you don't have bad guys, how will you play the role of the global super cop? the global policeman. So you, if even if there are no bad guys, you need to invent bad guys. So they first nurtured Saddam Hussein, and then suddenly all of a sudden they painted him as a bad guy. They kind of encouraged him to invade Kuwait in early 19 early in the early 90s, 1990 or 1991, whatever that was. And then they painted him as a bad guy, and so on and so forth. So they need bad guys. So Putin actually wanted to join NATO, but they did not allow him to do that. And then they slowly expanded NATO eastwards. They encircled him. They've placed nuclear weapons in various countries like Turkey, Netherlands, other places as well, right? To encircle Russia. And then Ukraine was the line that Putin could not allow them to cross, because that would be just it would indicate, it would signal to NATO, to the US, that we are powerless. We will just we will allow you to just keep going eastwards unchecked. So they pushed Putin into a corner, and they anticipated, of course, they anticipated, the Americans, that eventually this eastward expansion is going to lead to war. And they have used Ukraine as the cannon fodder for the war. So the people of Ukraine are suffering, are paying the price for the American policies, as it's always been with various nations. So that's what's happening. I don't see Mr. Putin falling. The Americans need a few bad guys, and they would also not want Mr. Putin to fall. So that's what is happening. They have certainly pushed him into a corner, and they anticipated the reaction that they would get from him, and maybe they wanted it. Maybe they want a completely bipolar world, which is what we are seeing, what's emerging, right? So yes, so that thing I would certainly agree with.